everybody, it's Brock, and we got a brand new episode of All About. We got one creepy looking critter for today's episode, and there might even be one in your tank and you don't even realize it. Today we're going to be discussing all about the Vermetid Snails. They are already scary enough, but zoomed in, they are absolute nightmare fuel. Let's start by discussing what even is a Vermetid Snail. Vermetid Snails are a very common invertebrate, also called worm snails. These hitchhiking parasites can plague a tank in the saltwater aquarium hobby. Upon birth, the snails will immediately attach themselves to a rock and continue to build a calcified shell that looks like a tube once it grows large enough. These snails tend to reside in the base of the shell and will poke their heads out, spewing a white web-like net, also known as a mucus net, that they use to catch detritus and plankton. Now that doesn't sound so bad now, does it? However, these snails can really harm your fish and corals. The mucus net will cover corals and cause corals to shrink and basically steal the nutrients they use to feed on throughout the day, and even to the point of sucking the calcium levels in the tank to build their tubes. These snails can also attach themselves to the base of a healthy coral, which will stunt its coral growth and can eventually damage their skeletal structure. So these guys are bad news whenever they start to take over. So people's first question is always, how can I get rid of or control these vermetid snails that are growing in my tank? One of the most popular ones is going to be super glue. It is a very easy and working solution to getting rid of the snails growing in your tank. You simply can squirt some super glue into the hole of the shell, and that'll eventually close it up and cause the snail not to be able to come out and eat. So you're going to be starving out the snail, causing it to eventually perish. Now, there is one thing you do want to keep in mind, though, whenever you are following this method. You're basically left with a dying snail in your tank, and that can just be a recipe for nitrates to rise. Now, of course, these snails are very, very small, so the level of nitrates for one snail can produce if they do die is going to be very small. However, if you do go in there and start shooting super glue into 20 of them, I definitely recommend you do a water change in the next week to avoid a spike in your levels. There's also a very old school way of using hydrochloric acid. However, I'm not even going to talk about it because I do not recommend it. I don't like for people to do it just because this method can kill a lot of the beneficial bacteria in the aquarium. Plus, there are just more efficient solutions than this one. Manually removing the snails is another way to get rid of these entirely. There are tools like bone cutters, which are usually used for cutting frags of SPS coral, which can easily remove the base of the shell off the rock if it's growing in an easy to access spot. You need to make sure anytime you are manually removing them that you are getting the base of the shell, because that is where the snail is going to be. Most snails do not grow their shells on flat surfaces, which make them easy to remove. A lot of times they'll be in between cracks, tiny little crevices in the tank between rocks, causing you to only break off the tube of the shell, which the snail will just eventually make another one. Using something like a screwdriver or ice pick with a pointy end will allow you to stab the base of the shell, killing the snail instantly. Doing this solution will definitely result in wanting to do a water change the same day, as you can run into a spike in nutrients, leaving that perished critter in there. Another very annoying factor of these snails is they typically house eggs in the shell to release into the aquarium, growing even more vermetid snails. So using the ice pick method can result in even growing more in the tank. It's kind of like hair algae for those that use a toothbrush to scrub rocks inside the tank. You're really just releasing more of those spores into the tank for algae to grow. If you are able to take that rock out into a separate bucket to get the snails off, that would be the best way to follow up with that ice pick method. That way you could take them out while they're in a bucket, and then you can put that rock back in the tank. Vermetid snails are a very hardy invert. They can survive a number of levels in the tank, spikes, whatever it might be that are causing those levels to get higher. Even temperatures. Remember when I accidentally caused global warming on my own tank? Yeah, those vermetid snails are still thriving, so they can survive a lot of stuff. Now your next question might be, are there any fish or inverts that you can put in your tank that will go and eat them for you? kind of just do a more natural process in the tank. For one, this will not only get rid of the snails, but also prevent new ones taking over the tank and causing them to reproduce. The best results I have seen are from bumblebee snails. They have been known to eat these type of snails in the aquarium. There are also different types of crabs, like an emerald crab or a coral crab, that can help tackle the issue with these snails. And lastly is going to be wrasse. Wrasse are known to eat pests in the tank. Now, are there any that will eat these? It kind of depends really on just the wrasse itself. The yellow chorus wrasse has shown great results in eating these snails. But even with adding these in the tank in hopes of getting rid of your vermetid problem, it can still be a hit or miss, because sometimes they will go after other food in the tank that's easier to feed on. If you're feeding your fish every day, they're going to get used to that, and a lot of times they'll just stop going after other critters in the tank. It's the same thing for your snails and your other kind of inverts that you put in there that are in there to clean up the tank. A lot of times they'll be running around catching over the leftover food. They won't even be hungry enough to actually go after these other critters, so you can run into that problem as well. The only real way of preventing the entry of these snails is closely investigating the things that you are adding to your tank. Live rock, new corals, new livestock. Even then, whenever you are watching it that close, it can be near impossible to spot them sometimes. These things are microscopic whenever they attach before they create that shell, and so they can attach to nearly anything, even snail shells, you'll find them on them. So really, if you do end up with them in your tank, control is your best bet. Now, looking around online just to see what some other people were thinking, a lot of people were just saying, it's too bad if you get them, you're just going to have to tear down your entire tank and start completely new with new rock. Well, that costs a lot of money, so not everybody's just going to want to tear down their entire tank. I can promise you my reef tank is not getting tore down because I have some vermetid snails in it. Really, control is going to be your best option. Get in there, try some new inverts like bumblebee snails, try wrasse. You never know, they might love eating on those things. Try those guys first. If you aren't seeing much results, next I would probably recommend the super glue method. That way you can get in there and kill them right off without breaking their shells or releasing the eggs anywhere. And then I would probably go the ice pick method of, if you can take your rock out, smack them off of the rock and then put the rock back in there. That's probably your next best bet. I will also say these things, whenever they do die, the shell usually stays behind and can basically fossilize onto the rock. So be very careful whenever you are handling rocks that do have these on there, because those shells are tough. There was one time I was building a tank for a client, and whenever I had built the rock structure up, I was trying to build a nice little bridge, and something kind of got unsturdy and started to fall. So whenever I reached back to grab it as quick as I could and gripped it really hard, one of those shells had stabbed into my finger, and let me tell you, pulling that thing out was not a fun day. So please be careful with them. They are a pain to deal with sometimes. Thank you again for stopping by to watch this episode of All About. Hope you learned a thing or two and can add some of these tips to your toolkit. If you have any further knowledge about these and how you've dealt with them in your own tank, please leave it down in the comments for a future viewer to see. The more we're going to learn from each other, the stronger we'll be in this hobby. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're new to this channel, make sure to check out the All About playlist that have many in-depth videos about marine life. And I hope everybody has a great week this week, and I will see y'all later.